So let me share the web work screen. Okay, so I did since Monday fix all of the sections. Every section is on web work now. Today, this morning, I noticed that the times were all over the place in terms of reduced and everything. So I tried to fix all of that. If you do notice at any point in time that something seems out of the ordinary, the times aren't right, something, again, just seems strange, let me know, okay? I'm happy to take a look at it. Web work is all user-created, user-based. It isn't if you've ever used a Pearson product, any of the other online services. It isn't like that. So there are other hiccups and bugs that we run into. So do let me know if you run into one of those. I already had a student run into a rounding error. So again, if one of those happens to you, shoot me an email. I'm happy to check. It really takes me less than a minute to check yours. And it takes you 20 minutes sometimes where you get super frustrated over the problem. So shoot me an email. I'm happy to look at them. Okay? And I only have one survey calculus class this semester. Normally I teach two. So one is a lot easier to kind of oversee. I have two intermediate algebras, and those are a little less, they're still hands-on, but they're a little less hands-on in terms of the online work. So definitely shoot me out. So just a couple notes about 1-1. If you join the class today, when we get to the classwork, I'm going to hopefully try and add you in to the web work system. It has to be added in. A couple people had issues getting into the system. If you still haven't gotten into the system and you're having issues, please let me know that as well. I'd like to get you in and make sure that we're all the way in. Okay. So here there was 8 problems. Some people had issues when they got to 7 and 8. That was the last problem we went over in the notes. And again, it was normally an algebraic error, but again, you have unlimited times to enter them in. All you have to do is shoot me an email when you get stuck, okay? So I have had students in the past enter it in 30, 40 times, depending on a problem when they get further into the class. Okay, don't get frustrated, just shoot me an email, please. I don't like students getting over frustrated over the system. Just shoot an email. I'm happy to help. So it was really like 7 and 8 where they ran into problems, okay? So if for some reason you overlooked the homework, even though I sent an email out yesterday because it seemed like a lot of you hadn't started, start checking emails. I send out emails again if I start noticing students aren't just on top of it, okay? I just want to make sure everybody gets things in on time. So your next homework set is due Friday at 1. It's always due before class starts, just so that we're ready for the next material. All right. Notice that this section has now moved down. It says closed. I'm going to double check. You should be able to still do the problems and get reduced. So I will double check that later on. It shouldn't say closed. I'll check, okay? You can email your instructor, obviously, from WebWork. I don't know that anybody did that, but you can email your instructor from WebWork. You can email me from your SLU.edu. However you want to contact me is fine. I'm not picky. I probably won't pick up the results from this WebWork until Friday, just in case people are lagging behind. There are quite a few hiccups in both systems I'm dealing with right now. Just a heads up that your first quiz is going to be Monday. It's in the calendar, okay? It's over 1-1 through 1-3, so it'll be everything this week. It's going to open at midnight Monday morning, and it will close at 11:59 p.m. Monday night. So this class is going to open, it'll be open all day Monday. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about it on Friday, but I just wanted to give everyone a heads up. Friday, we will for sure need laptops. We're going to get into some Excel on Friday. We're going to kind of baby ourselves in on Friday. I have heard from at least one student who's having issues with Excel. So if you are having that, let me know. But we do need that, and we need Excel, and we need it on the system, not on the internet, okay? All right, so today's lecture is kind of this introductory section, almost bridge between where we were on Monday and where we're going. And the interesting part is the material really won't show up again. So it's kind of like, here it is, here's this homework set that really doesn't go with anything in the textbook very much. There's stuff that was in the homework that is nowhere in the textbook. So we're gonna do the homework, we're gonna do the lesson, we're gonna kind of make a check mark on it, and it won't show up again. Okay, so we're gonna do it for today, we're gonna do it on the homework, and then we're not really gonna worry about it too much, okay? So we're gonna start with some handwritten notes. If you open my email, there is another piece of a note sheet. We'll deal with that later. So let me, get my whiteboard open. Okay. So we're doing 1-2 today. Okay. We're going to look at 4 different functions. They're the 4 probably, well, they're 4 of the functions that we're going to deal with besides linear that we're going to look at. Okay. The first one we're going to talk about is quadratic. My assumption is that you've seen a lot of quadratic functions in the past. Okay, the book does go into quite a bit about quadratic functions, but again, if you ever looked at my book outlines, I have pared down what we need to know. So we don't need all of the background that we have in the past. So the general form of a quadratic function is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. I don't believe we're going to need the vertex form. We will see it, but we won't focus on it. Okay, quadratic functions are going to be used quite a bit, especially while we're doing Excel early on. Okay, in terms of the business world, it's used in the study of revenue and profit. So we're going to use it to find out, where does all of the money we make come from? So we're going to study a lot of quadratic functions that are the ones that look like hills, not the ones that look like U's. Okay, a very important formula that you're going to need to memorize that gets mentioned here that will carry on. So this is like the one piece that we will use again, is that revenue equals profit times quantity. And we like to shorthand it as R equals PQ. Okay, so we talked about QP coordinates on Monday. Okay, revenue is found by multiplying profit times quantity. Or price times quantity, sorry. I was thinking profit because I wrote profit, but it's price. Let's put the right word in there. Okay. All right. Occasionally, and sometimes at the beginning of lessons, we'll talk about some models being linear. But anybody who's studied any business already knows that there aren't a lot of linear models. Okay, so in 1.1 we talked about P equaling MQ plus B. Well, we can take this and substitute it in. So we'll talk about this again in another lesson, but we'll mention it here. So if it's going to be quadratic, we need to figure out, well, how does it turn into that ax squared plus bx plus c? Well, this is how it's going to do it. We're going to substitute mq plus b in for p. So we get p, not p. I've been doing this lately a lot with my work. Sorry. R equals mq plus b times q. I've been substituting it in for the wrong letter. So don't make my mistakes. And then if I were to simplify that, R equals mq squared plus bq. There's my quadratic, that q squared piece. So we will, again, see that again in the notes. So I said, hey, we're going to kind of introduce some things. Here's where it is. Have enough room here. I kind of want to leave it on this page. So there is a graph in the book. I mentioned, I believe in this class the other day, that my drawings aren't great. I'll show you the seating chart here in a little bit. It's impressive, I tell you. Okay, so the P is the vertical and the Q is the horizontal. So if we're going to have a quadratic, and I mentioned it's a hill. So here's my revenue. Okay, there's also going to be what's a demand, and it's linear. And it goes down. The demand function always goes down, and we'll, again, talk about it more. We're just kind of introducing it here. So there's a much nicer looking chart in the book. Let's see if I can share my picture. I'll show you our very nice seating chart. If I can. So you know that it is not nope, it's not going to let me. At least not on this end. I'll share it via email at some point. I was wondering if it would or not. Okay. So that's quadratic. We're going to deal a lot with quadratic, especially probably all the way through 2.2. So for the beginning. And then when we get to 2.3, we're going to introduce extra models that we're going to deal with. So probably the second one we're going to deal with is the exponential model. So I did notice when I was kind of glancing at some of the things you needed to know for this class in our syllabus that I copied and pasted, was that they asked you to know about exponential functions and logarithmic functions. When I teach college algebra here at SLU, one of the things that's very interesting is I have students locate the E button on their calculator, and you would be surprised how many people don't know where that is. Okay, so the exponential functions are the E functions. And it is kind of hard to find sometimes. Don't feel bad if you're like, hey, kind of sounds familiar, but doesn't. All right, so we're gonna see a lot of functions that look like this, where you have some number possibly times e to a variable. Again, e is 2.72 with some number that goes on forever like pi does. Okay. When we get to Excel, which is on Friday, and a huge thing that happens, I'm going to write it in red actually, is that in Excel, E is EXP parentheses. Okay, so if you worked in Excel at all, and I do have students that have no experience in Excel, so if you're a student that has never touched Excel before, never written anything in a cell, you'll be all right. I teach this course as nobody's had experience with Excel. So if you have experience with Excel, the first chapter is going to be fairly boring. I apologize to you, but I have to teach it like nobody has experience with it. Okay, but E in Excel doesn't take a caret function. Okay, so it doesn't have that little hat looking button on your keyboard, unlike every other function that has an exponent where it says, you know, to the squared, to the third, but the E does not. And that's where a lot of students get tripped up. So that's why I wrote it in red. It's the only function that doesn't take that caret is the E function. Okay. Anybody who's studied biology has used it for exponential growth and decay. And I'm not assuming anybody has, but if you have, we use it there. If you're an accounting major, we use it for continuous compounding. And that function looks like this. A equals P for principal E to the RT. So that might look familiar to some of you. A lot of times we teach that in math, algebra 2, college algebra, those types of things. Okay. So exponential functions. The third one that we take a look at is inversely proportional. So the function is 1 over x. All of these functions we will eventually learn to take the derivative of. That'll be in chapter 4. It's a long way away. So if you have any calculus background, we won't take derivatives till chapter 4. Okay. So when we do inversely proportional ones, we're looking at a fixed amount of money. Spent to acquire all of a given amount. It's also used to describe price as a function of supply. So I haven't used a lot of shorthand, but I'm sure you've had math teachers in the past that use shorthand. Anytime I use shorthand and you don't understand what it is, please ask. Okay, there are other ones in section 1, 2 that we won't worry about. I believe one is sinusoidal. There's like 2 other ones in there. They're really complicated. We'll never see it in the rest of the textbook. I don't even know why they're introduced because we won't see them. So there are other ones in 1, 2, but again, we won't see them. The last one is the logarithmic model. So you're going to see the natural log of just x with a number in front, or the natural log of something multiplied by x. We'll definitely get into logarithms later on. Okay, its big thing that we will definitely talk about is that it is the inverse of the exponential model. Okay, it can be shown by the accumulation of quantity that is inversely proportional to our variable. So again, the last 3 are kind of like, hey, we're going to use these. Hey, we're going to deal with them. These are kind of what they do. The quadratic, we'll build on that. Again, we're going to really use it heavily throughout chapter 1 and 2, almost exclusively. So the next part is really going to be where we hit on some of what you're going to see in the homework is the other note sheet. So I did send this in the email. So it is in your email, it is in Blackboard. I didn't want you to have to write all of this mess out. I assume everybody's heard of independent and dependent variables at some point in time. I don't assume you've ever taken statistics. You may have, if you're not a freshman here. But you may have in high school. I know some high schools have statistics courses at this point, which is nice. I never was able to take a pure statistics course in high school. But I often would get confused with independent and dependent variables, even when we talked about it in math courses. So what I did when I wrote these down, because they're going to be helpful, because they're going to ask you independent versus dependent on these homework problems. And even then, they're not super easy to realize. So I looked it up on the internet and I found a 6th grade math book definition that I thought was super easy. Because sometimes when writers write, they write for 5th graders in newspapers. You're supposed to write to a 5th grade level. Well, let's write what independent and dependent are for us to all understand. So the independent variable is the variable whose effect you are measuring. And it's often the X variable. Okay, and the dependent variable is the variable you actually measure. And this one's often the Y. So we're not going to purely say, hey, P's and Q's here, because this lesson, again, doesn't really fit into that model per se. We're going to think X's and Y's for this one. So again, one whose effect you're measuring, the other one, the variable we're actually measuring. So one's an effect and one's the variable we do measure. So let's go back to the paper. So they're going to give you a statement. So on number one, it says you want to measure the effect of different amounts of oxygen on the rate of yeast growth. Okay, what is the independent variable? So we want to look for so the independent is what effect are we measuring? Okay. And it's really easy to get confused. And let me show you what's nice about this lesson. Let's look at web order. Everybody have that. So again, not to make it super tricky for you, I'm not trying to like make this a nightmare. I eliminated 4 of the problems. There's only 4 problems. And look, they are all multiple choice. So if you get super confused about, in this case, the free variable is the independent. It says the equivalent of X. But just so you know, like if you get really confused and you're like, I don't really know, they're all multiple choice on web work for you. So don't feel super bad if you're like, I really don't get it even after the lesson. Again, not tested. I'm not super worried about it. Okay, so if we're looking for the variable whose effect we're measuring, it literally says, at least in this one, we're measuring the effect of amounts of oxygen. So the independent variable here is the amount of oxygen. The dependent, if it were to go on and ask for the dependent, which is what are we measuring? We're measuring the rate of yeast growth, which is really the only other noun in the sentence, if you're thinking about it clearly. So number 2, you want to see if playing music makes plants grow taller. What's the dependent variable? What are we measuring? So are we measuring the music or are we measuring the height of the plants? So if we think of it that way, it's a little bit easier to realize, well, we always measure height. So in this case, the dependent is the height of the plant. And the independent is the music. So do we play the music louder, softer? faster, slower. You could do different measurements with that. On number 3, it says orchids were studied to determine if the amount of humidity affected the flowering of the plants. What is the independent variable? Okay, the independent here, be careful because it does say the word affected, but it's talking about affected in terms of the amount of humidity. So the independent here is the amount of humidity. Okay, if we change the amount of humidity, it's going to then measure the flowering of the plants. So the plants will grow smaller or bigger depending on how humid it is. And the last one, we're going to test a new drug that prevents sneezing in people allergic to grass. So the dependent variable here is sneezing. It's not, hey, we're going to make it independent that we're going to sneeze no matter what. Okay? It's sneezing depending on the drug. So are we taking the control? Are we taking 2 milligrams of the drug? Are we taking 10 milligrams of the drug? Okay, so the independent is the drug. Okay, so again, not that anybody had issues with the classwork. You guys were all good about doing the classwork. This is a little bit trickier, okay? So I did pick easier examples for us to go through together. These are going to be similar to kind of the problems that you're going to get in the homework, except the homework's multiple choice. So there's only 4 on here. So if you get stuck, you can ask each other, you can look at my key. I'm going to put my key up here. Just make sure. I had a really hard time getting everyone to email me their classwork. So when you're done, either email me your classwork right away or try and email me at some point this afternoon. I need a copy of your work. This one's really not going to require a lot of work. I just need a copy of all of the answers that you have for this classwork. So at some point in time, I need that so that I can give you credit for today's class. Any questions? All right, so just a reminder, if anybody's having trouble with web work, let me know that. I want to help you. If anybody is brand new, I need to put you in the system, so I need to work on that. And then if you move seats or anything like that, I need to know that so I can put you into the seating chart. Again, I don't like seating charts, but we're required by school. So